The smell hit me first. That specific, acrid scent of burnt coffee beans that always clung to the air in the daily grind. It was the scent of my own death. I stood across the street, watching through the large plate glass window as the ghost of my past played out a matinee performance. There they were, Chloe, my best friend forever and ever, and Mark, my boyfriend of 2 years. Her perfectly manicured hand rested on his thigh right where it had been the first time. His thumb was tracing lazy circles over her knuckles. It was a perfect frame-for-frame remake of the memory that had sent me, sobbing and blind, into the path of a delivery truck. Deja vu is a funny thing. It's supposed to be a glitch, a flicker of the unfamiliar feeling familiar. For me, it was a high-definition replay with the director's commentary track enabled. As I watched them, their real thoughts, their true selves, bled into my awareness. It was a strange new sense, like hearing a frequency no one else could. It had flickered on the moment I'd woken up in my own bed, gasping for air, the day of my accident magically reset. She's so gullible, Chloe's mind purred, a smug, self-satisfied thought that felt like warm honey laced with arsenic. Look at her, probably picking out a new flavor of lip gloss. So innocent. I glanced down at my hand. The lip gloss in question was Strawberry Sunset. A small, bitter laugh threatened to escape my lips. Mark's mind was, as always, a less sophisticated instrument. It was a sledgehammer of simple needs. Just a few more weeks until I can get that internship recommendation from her dad. Then we can drop her and not have to pretend anymore. He shifted in his seat, his knee brushing hers. God, I wish she'd hurry up with the cash. Chloe's so much hotter when she's not faking that nice girl crap. A cold, beautiful calm settled deep in my bones. It was a feeling I'd never had before, not grief, not rage, just a profound and chilling certainty. In my first life, their betrayal had shattered me into a million pieces. In this life, it was forging me into a weapon. They thought I was the same fragile, trusting Sarah. They had no idea they were already ghosts, their futures already written off, their karmic bill about to come due. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A calendar alert, meeting, Elias Vance, 1 hour, the first domino. I plastered a bright, unsuspecting smile on my face, the one I knew they expected. Time for the lamb to enter the slaughterhouse. I pushed open the cafe door, the little bell chiming my arrival, a sound that now felt like a starting gun. There you are, Chloe said, her voice a perfect imitation of affection. We were just talking about you. Thank God, her mind sighed in relief. Now we can get this over with. All good things, I hope? I asked, sliding into the booth opposite them. Mark gave me that lazy, handsome grin that used to make my stomach do flips. Now it just made me want to check my wallet. Only the best, he said, his voice smooth as silk. His mind, however, was a different story. Just smile, don't say anything stupid. Get the money for the weekend trip, get the money. I am so sorry I'm late, I said, arranging my bag on the seat beside me. I was helping Jessica with her history paper. She was totally swamped. Chloe's eyes softened with practiced sympathy. You're such a good sister, Sarah. Honestly, I don't know how she'd manage without you. The thought that accompanied this Hallmark card sentiment was sharp and ugly. More like a doormat. Jessica has her trained just as well as we do. It was true in a way. My older sister Jessica had always perfected the art of weaponized incompetence. She lived in a self-imposed shadow, convinced the world had handed me the sunny side of the street, while she got the damp, mossy alleyway. Her resentment was a low, constant hum in our house, a background radiation I'd only learned to detect since my rebirth. Just last night at the dinner table, I'd watched her push green beans around her plate while my dad praised a recent essay I'd written. That's wonderful, Sarah, he'd said. Your professor must have been impressed. Jessica had let out a small, put-upon sigh. Of course he was. Sarah's always the brilliant one. I'd focused, just for a second, past her martyred expression and into the thought behind it. God, it's so sickening. If I didn't have to work my part-time job, I'd get good grades too. Maybe if she gets her heart broken by that loser Mark, Dad will finally pay more attention to me. She wasn't an active player in their little drama, not really. She was more of a silent vulture, circling overhead, patiently waiting for something to die so she could swoop in and claim a scrap. Her complicity was passive, but it was there, a rot in the foundation of our family. Back in the cafe, Mark leaned forward, resting his chin on his hands. He was deploying the full force of his charm, the big, earnest eyes, the focused attention. It was his signature move. Speaking of being swamped, he started, Professor Davies announced the Innovators Grant today. My heart gave a little jolt. This was it. The first test. The project I'd poured my soul into for months. The project they were about to steal. Oh? I feigned casual interest, taking a sip of the lukewarm water the server had brought. Yeah, the prize is $10,000 and a summer mentorship with a top firm. Chloe chimed in, her eyes gleaming. Her mind was practically vibrating. Don't mess this up, Mark. Lay the groundwork. Make it seem natural. I know you've been working on that community solar panel idea, Mark said, his voice laced with admiration. It sounds incredible. Honestly, babe, you're a genius. A genius who's about to make us 10 grand, was the silent amendment. Oh, it's nothing yet, I demurred, looking down at the table. Just a few ideas. No, it's brilliant, Chloe insisted, her sincerity so flawless it deserved an award. You should definitely go for it. We'll help you in any way we can. By taking the idea and submitting it ourselves, her mind finished. I looked up and met her gaze. I let a flicker of doubt cross my face. I don't know, it feels too big for me to handle alone. I saw it then, a tiny, predatory spark flash between her and Mark. The sharks were smelling blood in the water. My blood. You're not alone, Mark said, reaching across the table to cover my hand with his. His touch felt like a spider crawling on my skin. We're a team, remember? My team, Chloe's mind asserted, a possessive, triumphant spike. My win. I let my shoulders slump in a parody of relief. I gave them a watery, grateful smile. Really? You'd help? Of course, they chorused, a symphony of deceit. The first hook was set. I felt a grim satisfaction settle over me. This wasn't a story about a heartbroken girl anymore. This was a story about a huntress. And the prey had just voluntarily walked into the trap. I squeezed Mark's hand back, my touch light and trusting. Thank you, I whispered. That means the world to me. Over the next week, I played the part of the overwhelmed ingenue to perfection. I'd bring my notebooks to the library where we'd all study together. I'd sigh and chew on the end of my pen, complaining about a creative block. I just can't seem to get the budget calculations right, I'd whine, pushing a spreadsheet across the table. It just doesn't seem financially viable. I'd watch as Chloe's eyes scanned the numbers, her mind whirring with solutions to the problems I had deliberately planted. Mark would rub my back, offering useless but soothing platitudes. You'll figure it out, babe. You always do. His mind, meanwhile, was miles away. Is this going to take long? The game starts at 8. One evening, I focused my mind reading on them from across the library stacks. They thought they were whispering. They had no idea I had a front row seat to their entire conspiracy. We just need to rephrase the mission statement, Chloe was thinking, her mental voice crisp and directorial. We'll emphasize the economic benefits over the environmental ones. It sounds more pragmatic. And we'll use the data from that flawed budget she showed us to prove why our new approach is superior. Mark's role, as always, was presentation. I'll be the face of it, he thought, a wave of narcissistic pleasure washing through him. I'm better at selling it. We'll say the idea came to us during that weekend trip to the cabin. Plausible deniability. The final bitter cherry on top came from Chloe. Her dad is one of the judges on the grant committee. He'll have to recuse himself from judging our entry, but he'll see our names. He'll be impressed. This is perfect. It was time to hand them the shovel to dig their own graves. The next day, I approached them with a manila folder, my face a mask of defeat. I'm giving up, I announced, my voice trembling slightly. I can't make it work. It's too flawed. I pushed the folder towards them. Here, you guys have been so helpful. Maybe you can use some of my research for one of your own projects. I just want it out of my sight. I watched them exchange a look of barely concealed glee. It was a masterpiece of silent communication. The surprise, the feigned reluctance, the ultimate greedy acceptance. Sarah, no, Chloe said, her voice dripping with faux concern. You can't just quit. I have to, I said, my voice small. It's stressing me out too much. She's literally handing it to us on a silver platter. Mark's mind gloated, so loud it was practically a shout. I could kiss her, but I'll kiss Chloe later instead. Well, Chloe said, slowly pulling the folder towards her. If you're absolutely sure, we wouldn't want your hard work to go to waste. They had taken the bait, all of it. That night, my apartment was a war room. The air smelled of strong black coffee and the low hum of my laptop. With their stolen, flawed proposal now in their possession, I was free to work on the real thing. I resurrected my original data, polished my mission statement, and created a sleek, professional presentation. I worked with a furious, joyful energy I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just an academic project anymore. It was a declaration of independence. I named the project Phoenix, and under that pseudonym, I submitted it to the grant committee through their anonymous online portal at 3 a.m. Phase 2 was more delicate. I opened a new, untraceable email account. The username was simple, Veritas 2025. I compiled my evidence with the precision of a prosecuting attorney. First, the time-stamped files of my original research from months ago. Second, a side-by-side comparison of my flawed notes and the proposal I knew they would submit, highlighting the identical, deliberately incorrect data points. The piece de resistance was the audio file. The day I'd given them the folder, I'd accidentally left my phone on the table, its voice recorder app silently capturing their triumphant conversation after I'd left. Can you believe she just gave it to us? Chloe's voice, clear as a bell. I told you she was wrapped around my finger. Mark's smug reply. 10 grand, here we come. I edited the clip down to its most damning 30 seconds. I attached all 3 files to the email, addressed it to the Dean of Students and the entire grant committee, and wrote a simple 2-sentence body. To whom it may concern, I believe a serious act of academic plagiarism has occurred regarding the Innovators Grant. The attached evidence should clarify the situation. I hit send. Then I leaned back in my chair, took a long, slow breath, and waited for the world to burn. The day of the grant ceremony, I wore a simple blue dress and sat in the back of the auditorium. The air was buzzing with nervous energy and the faint scent of hairspray. I saw Chloe and Mark in the 3rd row, looking smug and confident. Mark kept shooting glances towards the stage, as if practicing his acceptance speech in his head. Chloe was texting, probably updating her LinkedIn profile already. Dean Albright, a man whose permanent expression was one of mild disappointment, stepped up to the podium. He went through the usual pleasantries, thanking the committee, praising the quality of the submissions. This year, however, was unique, he said, his tone shifting. The room quieted. We received a late, anonymous submission of such exceptional quality that the committee felt it deserved a special commendation, even though it is ineligible for the monetary prize due to its anonymity. I felt a small smile touch my lips. The project, titled Phoenix, presented a revolutionary and brilliantly researched model for sustainable energy. We will be reaching out in hopes the creator will come forward. He paused, letting that hang in the air. I saw Chloe and Mark exchange a confused look. Then the dean's face hardened. Which brings me to a more troubling matter. Oh, here we go. This was the part I'd been waiting for. It has come to our attention that a submission by 2 students, Chloe Daniels and Mark Peterson, bears a striking resemblance to the core concepts of the Phoenix's project and contains significant evidence of academic dishonesty. A collective gasp went through the auditorium. I watched as every head in the front 3 rows turned to stare at them. The color drained from Chloe's face, leaving her foundation looking like a pale, chalky mask. Mark looked like he'd been tasered. His mouth was hanging slightly open, his confident posture collapsing in on itself. A formal academic integrity investigation has been launched, the dean concluded, his voice like gravel. Now moving on to our 3rd-place winner. But no one was listening. The show was over. Chloe and Mark were stumbling out of their row, their faces a mask of horror and disbelief, the whispers of their peers following them like a swarm of angry bees. They showed up at my apartment 2 hours later. It had started to rain, a pathetic fallacy if I'd ever seen one. They were drenched and shivering, standing on my doorstep like a pair of drowned rats. I opened the door, my face a carefully constructed canvas of surprise. "Guys, what's wrong? You're soaked." Their minds were a chaotic storm of panic. "She can't know. How could she possibly know? Someone must have overheard us. That's the only way." Chloe's thoughts raced, desperately searching for a logical explanation that didn't involve me. Mark's mind was a simpler, more primal scream. "My father is going to disown me. I'm ruined. Ruined. Ruined." "Sarah," Chloe began, her voice cracking, "something terrible has happened." "We've been framed," Mark blurted out, his eyes wild. "Someone stole our idea and set us up." I feigned shock, my hand flying to my mouth. "What? Who would do something like that?" "We don't know," Chloe sobbed, real tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "But the university is investigating us. They think we plagiarized. We need you to help us, to tell them it was our idea all along, that we were all working on it together. Please, Sarah, you're the only one who can clear our names." They stared at me, their faces a mess of desperation and hope. They still saw me as their safety net, their gullible, sweet-natured friend who would fix everything. They had no idea I was the one who had cut the rope. I looked at them, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. I let the silence stretch, savoring the exquisite agony on their faces. "Plagiarism?" I finally asked, my voice wide-eyed and innocent. "What project are you even talking about?" The fallout from the grant scandal was glorious, but it wasn't the end. They were placed on academic probation, their reputations shredded, but they weren't expelled. It wasn't enough. I knew they would regroup. I knew they would come for me again, and I knew their next move would be driven by the one thing that truly motivated them: money. 2 months crawled by. I kept my head down, focusing on my studies and pretending to be heartbroken by my friend's misfortune. I offered them sympathy, which they lapped up like starving cats, all the while their minds seethed with resentment towards me. If she hadn't given up on the project, none of this would have happened, I overheard Chloe thinking as we sat in the campus cafeteria. It was a spectacular feat of mental gymnastics, even for her. Then the inevitable happened. Mark called me, his voice oozing a newfound desperate sincerity. He wanted to meet, alone. We met at a sterile, soulless coffee chain downtown. He was dressed up, wearing a button-down shirt I'd bought him for his birthday. He'd even shaved. It was his "I'm a serious adult" costume. "Thanks for coming, Sarah," he said, sliding a lukewarm latte across the table towards me. "Of course, Mark. What's up?" He took a deep breath, mentally rehearsing the speech I knew Chloe had written for him. I could hear the faint echo of her instructions in his head. "Frame it as a way to prove yourself, to make her proud, emphasize the future, our future." "Look," he began, leaning forward and fixing me with his most earnest gaze. "The last few months have been a wake-up call. I've been drifting, relying on others." He shook his head, a gesture of self-deprecating regret. "Relying on you, it wasn't fair." I just nodded, letting him spin his web. "I want to build something of my own, something real." He slid a glossy brochure across the table. It was for a company called Elite Edge Tutors. The logo was cheesy, and the stock photos were laughably generic. "I'm starting a business, a bespoke tutoring service for wealthy high school kids. The market is huge." "Wow, Mark," I said, injecting my voice with awe. That's ambitious." "She's buying it. She's totally buying it," his mind celebrated. "It is," he agreed, his confidence growing. "But I have a solid business plan." "Written by Chloe an hour ago," his mind supplied. "There's just one hurdle, the startup capital. I need a loan to get it off the ground." He paused for dramatic effect. Here came the pitch. "The thing is, the bank sees me as a risk right now because of, you know." He gestured vaguely, referring to the academic probation. "But with a co-signer, someone with good credit and a stable financial background, they'd approve it in a second." He looked at me, his eyes wide and pleading. "I know it's a lot to ask, Sarah, but this is my chance to turn everything around. To prove to you, to my dad, to everyone, that I can be the man you deserve." The amount on the loan application he was picturing in his head was $50,000. The thought immediately following it was a vivid image of a beach in Bali, with him and Chloe clinking champagne glasses. I picked up the brochure, pretending to study it. The neon glare of a sports bar sign from across the street reflected in my eyes. His mental image of a fictitious office space was so vivid, I could almost smell the fresh paint. "I don't know, Mark," I said, my voice soft and hesitant. "That's a lot of money." "I'll pay you back every penny with interest," he promised, leaning so far forward I could smell his cologne. "This isn't a handout. It's an investment. In me. In us." I let a long silence stretch between us. I let him see the conflict on my face, the classic battle between a sensible head and a foolish heart. He was so sure he knew which one would win. "I'll have to think about it," I said finally, my voice barely a whisper. "But I believe in you, Mark." The hope that flared in his mind was so bright it was nauseating. He thought he had me. He thought I was still his fool. Revenge, I was learning, was a dish best served with a side of meticulous research. My mind-reading ability was more than just a party trick for eavesdropping on scumbags. It was a search engine for the human soul. I spent the next evening in my quiet apartment, a cup of tea growing cold beside me, and focused on Mark. I didn't need to be near him. It was like tuning a radio to a familiar station. I closed my eyes and sifted through the noise of his thoughts, his anxieties about the upcoming midterms, his annoyance at his roommate, and then the jackpot. His finances. I pulled on the thread of his lone desperation. Names of creditors surfaced in his mind. Overdue balances flashed like neon signs. Maxed out Visa, past due on the Amex. God, that online poker site? I saw the last 4 digits of a secret credit card he'd hidden from everyone. I saw it all, but my real target wasn't the debt itself. It was the source of his deepest financial fear, his father. Mark Peterson Sr. was a man Mark spoke of with a mixture of terror and awe. A self-made, no-nonsense construction magnate who despised weakness and irresponsibility above all else. Mark's allowance and tuition were dependent on maintaining an illusion of being a respectable, hard-working heir apparent. An illusion I was about to shatter into 1,000 pieces. I spent the next 2 hours compiling a portfolio. It was my masterpiece of passive aggression. I used my newfound knowledge to do some digging, legally, of course. Public records, a few well-placed, anonymous inquiries. I found records of his previous failed ventures. I took screenshots of the online betting portal showing his staggering losses. I added the overdue credit card statements I'd divined. The final piece was a copy of the $50,000 loan application he'd filled out, which he'd foolishly saved on his public university cloud drive. I printed everything on high-quality paper, arranged it in a neat folder, and slid it into an express courier envelope. The recipient, Mr. Mark Peterson Sr. at his gleaming corporate headquarters downtown. No note, no return address. Just the cold, hard, undeniable truth. I dropped it in the mail slot and walked away, feeling the satisfying click of the lock sealing his fate. The psychic shockwave hit me 2 days later. I was sitting on a bench in the campus quad, enjoying a rare moment of sunshine and pretending to read a textbook. Suddenly, a jolt of pure, unadulterated terror flooded my senses. It was so potent I almost dropped my book. It was Mark. I closed my eyes and focused. He was a block away, pacing frantically outside the business school, his phone pressed to his ear. Even from this distance, I could almost hear the booming, furious voice on the other end of the line. His father. Mark's mind was a symphony of destruction. Cut off! He cut me off completely. The car, the tuition, everything. He said I was a disgrace. How did he find out? How did he know about the poker site? How? The call ended. Mark stood frozen for a second, his face pale and clammy. Then he did exactly what I knew he would do. He called Chloe. I kept my psychic channel open, settling in for the show. "It's over!" he screamed into the phone, his voice ragged with panic. "My dad found out. He knows everything. He cut me off." There was a pause. I could imagine Chloe on the other end, her mind racing, processing this new, inconvenient data. Her mental voice, when it came, was cold and sharp. "Useless. He's completely useless now, broke. What am I supposed to do with a broke, useless child? Her spoken voice, however, was a buttery balm of sympathy. Oh my God, Mark, what happened? How? I don't know how, he roared, attracting stares from passersby. But this is your fault. This whole stupid loan idea was yours. You pushed me into it. My fault? Chloe shrieked back, her pretense of support vanishing in a puff of rage. Excuse me? I'm not the one with a secret gambling addiction. You're blaming me for your own stupidity? I need a new plan, her mind calculated, already cutting its losses. Maybe I can transfer schools, get away from this train wreck. Their alliance, a flimsy thing built entirely on my exploitation, was crumbling to dust in real time. He was no longer her ticket to a lavish lifestyle, and she was no longer his strategic partner. They were just two selfish, desperate people with a suddenly empty bank account. I leaned back on the bench, turned my face to the sun, and smiled. The ticking clock of their desperation had just been reset. And this time, the alarm was going to be deafening. In the quiet aftermath of Mark's financial implosion, something shifted in me. The revenge was satisfying, a sugar rush of schadenfreude. But it felt incomplete. I was reacting to them, playing on their board. To truly be free, I needed to change the game entirely. That's when the memory surfaced. It was from my first life, a few weeks before the accident. My mom and I were looking through an old photo album. She'd paused on a faded picture of her own mother, my grandmother Eleanor, who had passed away when I was 10. Mom had a strange, worried expression on her face. She'd sighed and murmured something under her breath. I hadn't paid it much attention then, but now the words came back to me with stunning clarity. A thought I had accidentally brushed against even before my powers had fully manifested. At least Sarah has the nest egg. She'll never have to depend on anyone. A nest egg. My parents were comfortable, but we weren't nest egg people. My grandmother had been a sweet, quiet woman who grew prize-winning roses and smelled of lavender and old books. I'd inherited her collection of classic novels, not a secret fortune. Or had I? This was a new kind of hunt, not for revenge, but for the truth. I started spending more time with my mom, asking her about Grandma Eleanor. During one of our conversations, while she was reminiscing about her childhood, I gently steered her thoughts back to her mother's finances. I focused my ability, not reading her active thoughts, but sifting through the deeper layers of her memory, like an archaeologist brushing dust from a fossil, and there it was. 2 fragments of a memory, shiny and clear, the name of a bank, St. Genesius. A private, old-money institution downtown that I'd never even heard of. And a number, box 412. Getting into that bank was the next hurdle. Forging my mother's signature on a permission slip giving her daughter access to a family safety deposit box felt like a ridiculously small sin in the grand scheme of things. I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by a burning curiosity. The inside of St. Genesius was all marble floors and hushed tones. It smelled of old paper and wealth. A severe-looking woman with a tight bun led me into a sterile, silent viewing room. She placed a long metal box on the table and left, closing the heavy door behind me with a quiet, definitive click. My heart hammered against my ribs. I lifted the lid of box 412. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Some bonds, maybe. A deed to a small piece of land. A few pieces of heirloom jewelry. What I found was a thick portfolio bound in dark green leather. I opened it. The first page was a summary statement. My grandmother, Eleanor Vance, the quiet gardener, was the silent 90% majority shareholder of a company called Ethelgard Industries. I'd heard of them. Everyone had. They were a rising star in the biotech world, a company known for its ethical research and revolutionary patents. Their stock had tripled in the last year. My breath caught in my throat. I flipped through the pages, my hands trembling. It wasn't a nest egg, it was a kingdom. My quiet, unassuming grandmother had been a financial titan, a fierce, brilliant businesswoman who had built an empire and deliberately hidden it from the world, from her own family. At the very bottom of the box, beneath the portfolio, was a thick, cream-colored envelope with my name on it, written in a strong, decisive script that looked nothing like the shaky handwriting I remembered from her birthday cards. I broke the seal. My dearest Sarah, I hope you are reading this many, many years from now, and that your life has been filled with nothing but joy. But I am not a fool, and I have watched the people you and your mother choose to surround yourselves with. Kindness is a virtue, my girl, but do not mistake it for a shield. It is a gift you give to those who have earned it, not a key for others to unlock your life and take what they want. I have left you not a fortune, but a tool. It is a source of power, and power is the only true independence a woman can have in this world. I pray you never need to use it as a weapon, but if you do, wield it without hesitation. A kingdom requires a queen. Do not be afraid, you have my strength in your blood. Tucked inside the letter was a single heavy business card. It read, Elias Vance, Chief Counsel, Ethelgard Industries, Vance. My grandmother's maiden name, my supernatural helper, left for me like a secret weapon in a video game. The power dynamic of my entire world had not just shifted. A tidal wave had just crested, and it was about to wash away everything. My first call to Elias Vance was like stepping into an alternate reality. I half expected him to be a stuffy old man, but his voice was warm and surprisingly young. Miss Jacobs, he said, a note of reverence in his tone. I have been waiting for your call for a very long time. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman. She was a gardener, I said, the words feeling foolish as they left my mouth. He chuckled. That was her cover. In reality, she was the sharpest mind I've ever had the privilege of working for. The entire corporate world knew of the architect, the mysterious majority owner of Ethelgard. No one knew it was a woman in her 70s who preferred soil under her fingernails to a seat in a boardroom. We met the next day. Within 24 hours, the world knew my name. Elias handled the press with surgical precision. There were no splashy interviews, just a quiet, formal announcement. Ethelgard heiress revealed. Sarah Jacobs, granddaughter of founder Eleanor Vance, to assume control. My net worth became a public record overnight. My face was on the cover of financial journals. I was no longer Sarah, the nice girl with the cheating boyfriend and the backstabbing best friend. I was one of the wealthiest young women in the country. Chloe, Mark, and my sister Jessica now existed in a world where I was not the floor they walked on, but the sky above them, and a storm was brewing. Their attempt to re-enter my orbit came a week later, a text from an unknown number. It was Chloe. Sarah, I know you must hate me, but could we please just talk for the sake of what we once had? We're desperate. I agreed to a meeting. It was time for the final act. I chose the venue, the lobby bar of the Grand Criterion Hotel, a place so opulent and stuffy it made St. Genesius look like a public library. The air smelled of money and lemon polish. I got there first and chose a secluded booth with velvet seats. I ordered a sparkling water and waited. They arrived together, a united front of desperation. They looked diminished, smaller. Chloe's designer dress was a season old, a detail she would have been mortified by before. Mark's confident swagger was gone, replaced by a nervous, shuffling energy. His watch was a cheap imitation of his old one. And Jessica, my sister, trailed behind them, her eyes darting around the lobby, unable to meet mine. She looked like a child who had been dragged along to an adult appointment. They slid into the booth opposite me. The silence was thick and suffocating. They had prepared speeches. I didn't need to guess. I could hear the words looping in their minds, memorized and rehearsed. Chloe went first. She leaned forward, her face a carefully crafted mask of remorse. Sarah, she began, her voice soft and trembling. There are no words to tell you how sorry I am. Okay, start soft, her mind coached her. Show remorse. Make her feel your pain. The key is to get her to feel sorry for you again. That's the weak spot. What we did was unforgivable, she continued, a single perfect tear tracing a path down her cheek. I was jealous, and I was cruel, and I threw away the most precious friendship I have ever had. If I could take it all back, I would in a heartbeat. Mark was next. He wrung his hands on the table, looking down at them as if ashamed. I was a coward, he mumbled. I let my own insecurities and my financial problems turn me into a monster. I never deserved you. His mind was a more frantic, less polished monologue. Just get to the point. Ask for a job. Any job, a driver, a mailroom clerk, I'll do anything. I can't go back to my dad. I can't. Finally, it was Jessica's turn. She just shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I stood by and I watched it happen. She whispered. I was a terrible sister. I was so caught up in my own stupid self-pity that I let them hurt you. Family should protect each other, and I failed. Her thoughts were a messy, chaotic blend of genuine guilt and selfish panic. She's going to cut us off. Mom and Dad will be so disappointed in me. Will she help pay off my student loans? Maybe if I cry enough, she'll help. They finished. The great, unburdening performance was over. 3 pairs of eyes, brimming with tears and hope and greed, were fixed on me. This was the moment they were waiting for. The part where I, good old Sarah, the endless well of forgiveness, would break down, tell them it was okay, and offer them a lifeline. They saw me as a bank to be robbed, a resource to be plundered. Their apologies weren't for the wounds they'd inflicted. They were applications for a new kind of loan, one they hoped to secure with crocodile tears as collateral. I let the silence stretch. I watched the hope on their faces curdle into confusion, then into fear. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my sparkling water. I looked at Chloe at her perfect tear. I looked at Mark at his feigned shame. I looked at my sister at her tangled mess of regret and want. And then I gave them my answer. No. The word was quiet. It wasn't angry or triumphant. It was simple. A fact. A closed door. A final verdict. Chloe's face crumpled. No, she repeated, her voice a squeak. No, you don't forgive us, Mark asked, his voice rising in disbelief. I gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of my head. No, to all of it. I saw their minds shatter. The shock. The raw, unfiltered indignation that their performance had failed. The dawning, horrifying realization that the game was truly over, and they had lost. The Sarah they knew, the girl they could manipulate and control, was gone forever. In her place was a stranger, a queen on a throne they couldn't even see. I placed a $50 bill on the table to cover my water. I stood up, my movements fluid and unhurried. As I walked out of the lobby, leaving them in the wreckage of their own making, I didn't look back. I could feel their stunned, hateful gazes on my back, but for the first time in 2 lives, their feelings were completely and utterly irrelevant. I had liberated myself. The air outside the hotel had never smelled so clean. 1 year later, the world looked different from the 40th floor. My office at Ethelgard Industries was my sanctuary. It didn't smell like burnt coffee or cheap perfume. It smelled of old books, fresh orchids, and the crisp, clean scent of potential. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a panoramic view of the city, a sprawling universe of lights and ambitions that no longer intimidated me. I sat behind a large mahogany desk that had once been my grandmother's. Islias Vance, his hair now more silver but his eyes just as sharp, sat opposite me. He was more than a lawyer now. He was a mentor, a confidant, and the only person on earth who knew the full story. The board has approved the initial funding for the Phoenix Foundation, he said, sliding a folder across the desk. I smiled, a real, unforced smile. Good. The foundation was my passion project, a way to transmute the poison of my past into medicine for someone else's future. It provided full scholarships and mentorships for brilliant young women in STEM. Women with incredible ideas but no connections, no safety nets. Women who could have been me. Your grandmother would be immensely proud, Sarah, Elias said softly. I just nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I hoped so. This was her legacy, a kingdom I was learning to rule not with an iron fist, but with an open hand. That evening, I drove to my parents' house for our weekly dinner. I didn't take the chauffeured town car Elias insisted on. I drove a simple, unassuming sedan, the windows down, the evening air cool on my face. My relationship with my family had found a new, quiet equilibrium. The fury I'd once felt towards Jessica had dissolved, leaving behind a kind of weary, distant pity. We were civil. We spoke of weather and work. The chasm between us was still there, but we had stopped trying to scream across it. As I helped my mom in the kitchen, I caught a stray thought from Jessica, who was setting the table. She looks happy, she thought, a note of genuine surprise in her mind. There was no envy in it, not anymore. Just a quiet, resigned acceptance of the different paths our lives had taken. It was, in its own way, a form of peace. I gave my mother a long hug before I left, burying my face in her shoulder. She still smelled the same, a comforting scent of lotion and home that was an anchor to a past I no longer needed to run from. I was no longer defined by their betrayals, but by my own capacity for grace. The final piece of my old life slotted into place 6 months after that. I was sitting on the warm, white sand of a remote beach in Costa Rica, a place I'd found on a map that promised nothing but sun and silence. The sky was on fire, the setting sun painting the clouds in impossible strokes of orange, pink, and deep lavender. My phone was off, tucked away in a bag in a simple cabana 100 yards away. There were no board meetings, no financial reports, no ghosts. It was just me. The gentle, rhythmic crash of the waves on the shore, the salty, clean scent of the sea breeze. I had spent so long fighting, planning, and reacting. I had won. I had avenged the girl who died crying in the street. I had dismantled the lives of those who had hurt her. I had built a new life from the ashes, a fortress of wealth and power. But this, right here, was the real victory. The silence, the solitude, the profound, unshakable peace of being completely and utterly alone and not feeling lonely. I wasn't running from anything anymore. I was simply here, present, whole. I closed my eyes, tilted my head back, and took a deep, slow breath, filling my lungs with the clean air of my new beginning. I was finally, completely, gloriously free.